And then I'm going to put you on speaker. Okay, so Annie, tell me a bit about your career and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, I am Annie Schiffman. I started the company Downstage Media, which is specifically social media marketing for performing arts organizations. I started that about 3 years ago. It is not a coincidence that I started that at a time that both of my kids were going to be in school 5 days a week. Because one of the reasons I started the business was because I wanted more control over my life. I had been performing. I had been mostly doing improv comedy around the world with a bunch of different troops. And then I would also get called in, like, to perform at the big meeting for the big pharma company and stuff like that. And that was always really great, but I did not like waiting for phone calls. And actually, one of the first improv companies that I was in is called Chicago City Limits, and it is one of the longest running improv shows in New York City. I'm based out of New York. And so I found over time, they weren't able to keep up with their marketing anymore, right? Like they were really hot in the 80s and in the 90s, like Robin Williams would drop in and all of these big people were, checking out the show and sold out crowds and performing at this thing and that thing. And by the time I had joined, it was in the, I graduated from NYU in 2001. So it was in the early 2000s. And I mostly joined it because so much of their improv did not pay. Like you had to pay money to be able to perform, which I thought was nonsense, because I feel like artists should be paid. I don't know, I'm weird. And so I found that they weren't doing as much marketing anymore. And because of that, we had to deal with sort of that little mini heartbreak that would happen where shows would get canceled because there wasn't enough audience. And I found that then I had heard there was this new thing called Twitter that was happening. And I realized that by using these channels, we could start to get more people to come and check out the show. Because the organization at the time had sort of a mindset where they weren't looking to change anything, they weren't looking to make any adjustments. I didn't start using any of the practices with them, but I did start learning as much stuff as I could. And around the same time, I got married to my husband. He's also an actor. He started traveling with a show that he was in, and it turned out he was going to be gone like 200 days of the year. And we had really young children. And I knew that getting to auditions, getting to rehearsals, both unpaid activities most of the time, was just not the way that I want. It was very stressful, and I knew I wanted to change. And I knew that social media was going to be a really great equalizer. So I just spent as much time, nap times and bedtimes, as I could learning about social media. And then some friends of mine, one of my friends wrote a novel. He asked me for help. Someone else said, hey, could you help me with your improv or with our improv show? We're starting to tour. We just got an agent, blah, blah, blah. And so I just started using those skills. And then eventually I realized I knew enough, and enough other performers had established their careers without social media, but needed social media to sustain them, that there was a hole in the market and that I could fill that in. So I I oftentimes think of the Hamilton lyric, I'm not standing still, I am lying in wait. And that's what I did for a couple of years while I had, one kid at home. My husband was always traveling, who was in preschool and stuff like that. And I just built this company in my head and as much on paper as I could. And then I launched it in 2017. It was like posted first day of school picture on Facebook. The next day, hey, I just launched a new company. So since then, I've won awards for creating content, and I've spoken at a bunch of different conferences and stuff like that. And I've just found that this is a niche where this is like my wheelhouse, right? Like I'm a theater kid. It's like you guys, I love theater. I love the arts. And I just feel like people's work deserves to be seen. And by tapping into social media, you can make that happen.
That's awesome. That's great. Great.
That's how I got to where I am.
Wonderful, wonderful. So many, we could do a whole thing on that. Okay, cool. All right, so now I'm gonna ask a question. I didn't want to alarm you while I'm gonna mute myself while you're talking,
Okay.
just in case there's anything crazy, but it's not. I'm here and totally listening. That's just for sound. Okay, so so you and I've been a member of your Facebook group for a while and watching, and that's all great. The thing that prompted me to say, Annie, let's do an interview, is you mentioned a brand audit.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you tell me what is the social media brand audit that you do? How do you do it? What are you looking for?
Yeah. So oftentimes I think what happens with social media for performing arts companies in particular is that maybe a platform starts. So right now, TikTok is a very new thing, right? So they'll say, okay, we got to be on TikTok. A lot of people are on TikTok. Who's the youngest person in our office that we can get to set up this account? And then they start rolling that person. Maybe that person's an intern. Maybe that person isn't there for very long, whatever, sets up that social media account. And then they're all sort of spinning their wheels, doing the millions of other things, keeping all those plates spinning. And so then what happens is many times it sort of falls by the wayside. And some things that you set up, or the URL that you first set up for that Instagram account, is no longer an active URL, or it's no longer relevant. Or for example, like, with the pandemic, if your bio said that you're now touring the country with your show or something, that's no longer relevant. So the idea of the brand audit is just to take a fresh look at your different accounts and almost have a checklist. And these are the things that I'm looking for mostly. One, is it clear who your brand is, what kind of stuff you do, and who it's for, right? So that clarity, that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. So like, who are you? Are you a show that tours? Are you a theater institution that has your own theater and stays where you are? Are you a company where you teach classes and you just rent out rehearsal space? Like, who are you? What is it that you do, right? Like, and specifically, like, what do you want your audience to do? And then who is it for, right? So because I know that audiences respond to content that is up to date and that's about them. So I know who it's for if your content is in line with that. Like, if it's about, like, I can sort of tell, is it for me or is it not for me? And so can audiences. So that's one thing that I'm looking for, is how clear is it? The next thing I'm looking for is how easy is it to navigate? So even though we're not talking about websites, we're still talking about your social media accounts. Maybe it's your Instagram account or your Facebook or your Twitter, but is it clear what I am supposed to do as the audience member? What is it that you want me to do? Am I subscribing? Am I signing up for a class? What is that one thing that you want me to do? And then once I do that thing, is it easy for me to do? Like, is it easy for me to buy tickets to your show? Is it easy for me to, like, so how easy is it to navigate? So with the brand audit, I've got a checklist of like 36 sort of inspection points that I will look at with each social media account. And I'll sort of say to whoever is managing that account, like, so this is your big cover image. Is this image still relevant? Is this still what you want? Maybe you could add in the fact that you just got an amazing New York Times review. So maybe you could get 1 or 2 words on there, just, whatever it is, depending on the different platform. Because of course, each platform has its own little peccadillos and stuff. So 1, is it clear? 2, is it easy to navigate? And 3, is it up to date? So this is the hard part, because so many people are like, oh, I know we haven't really updated our stuff in a long time. Or yeah, we've been putting up stuff, but we've just sort of been throwing stuff up there. So it's not like a judgment thing. It's just like, okay, how up to date is it? Let's make sure you have, your intern's cell phone number is the cell phone number that's listed here. Are you sure that's the one that you want? Or I've had it where, like, with some accounts, they'll have their office phone number as the official phone number on the account, but then you can't actually, like if you get locked out of your account, then they can't call that number to get the thing. Like, so it gets all really tricky. So that's the thing. Is it clear? Is it easy to navigate? And is it up to date?
And when you say you're looking for like, okay, so they have an idea of who their audience is, who they want their audience to be, and you're looking at it to say like, does it look like it's for that person? Like literally, what are you looking at? Imagery, words, like how do you tell brass tacks,
Yeah.
something like that? Yeah.
So first of all, what platform are they on? Right? So if you have an older subscriber audience, then you're going to be more active on Facebook. A little bit younger, you might go with Instagram. Super young, like let's say maybe you're doing classes for youth theater or something like that, then you really want to be on Instagram and TikTok, right? Something like that. So first of all, just where are you posting to? Are you sure that where you're posting to is where your audience is? Because that's super important. And not only where your audience is, but where your audience's decision makers are. So for example, like if it's that you offer classes for teens, who's buying those classes? Are the teens or are the teens' parents? Because that's kind of where you want to be. But yeah, I'm looking at imagery. I'm looking at how they're using the copy. So many times, again, people like content that's about them. So when you're writing copy, does your audience use a lot of emojis? Does your audience care about punctuation, or are they like those people, like, could you start your copy with, so here's something I'm obsessed with, right? Like some brands that makes a lot of sense. Some brands that doesn't make sense. Some brands are just trying to be very cookie cutter. Come check out our show. It's this time and here. And there isn't any personality. And so then that is hard for people to see themselves in that. So we can add a little bit more flavor into what they're doing. But yeah, like, does it feel like it's opera? Is this legit kind of stuff? Or is this like downtown experimental, right? The same way that you want people to feel how they walk into your lobby is how you want them to feel when they're checking out your social media accounts, right? It should have that same feeling.
Great. And how does the brand audit that you do like fit into a broader brand audit effort that a company might do once a year, every couple years, like where they're looking at kind of all their material? How does what you do fit in there, or how does any social media look fit in?
Yeah, well, I recommend that people take a look at their social accounts every 6 months or so, just to make sure, like, have you had a logo update? Have you had, again, like, what is the thing that you want people to do? Are you using that URL to track people or to track clicks or things like that, right? So because all of that tracking exists, so is that the right URL that you want for the initiatives that you're doing? However, especially now, what's really nice is people they're not in that same speed that they would normally be in, where they're putting up a show and then they're getting ready for the next show and this is going on in the season and blah, blah, blah. There is a little bit of a step back. So now is a really good time to say, like, okay, what is our process for, like, how are we taking care of our patrons when they walk through the door and when we take their tickets? What is that experience like for them? Does what that experience is like, once it opens up again, like, will that experience reflect who we are and what our values are? And does that extend into what we're doing on social? So this way, it's, if you're all about the community and you're all about, we want to bring art to this community, great. Then you can also be posting about stuff that is happening in your community. I've seen that go huge. I literally had a post that went insane. It had quintuple the amount of engagement that it usually has, the amount of people who are liking and commenting and sharing on it, or retweeting, whatever it is on specific platform. This one happened to be on Facebook because it was for a performing arts nonprofit in a town. And so we just asked, this was sort of a meme that went around Twitter a lot. And so I just switched it over to Facebook, which was, tell me that you're from this town without telling me you're from this town, right? And so of course, now again, we weren't asking for donations. We weren't asking for them to check out the show. We're not, highlighting anything. We are asking the audience to share what they know about this community that they love. And part of their mission is to do stuff for the community. So it all kind of works together. And that's what I think is important, that if somebody is sending a DM on Instagram, the responses they're going to get are exactly the same as if they were going to be calling the box office. And the feeling that they get is going to be exactly the same as when they walk through the lobby. So that's what you want. You want to have that overall idea be exactly the same.
And you're leading right to my next question about, like, how do you measure the effectiveness of social media? What metrics do you use? Is it always about dollars? How do you have some measures that are about dollars and others? So how do you think about
So I mostly work in organic social media. So that means the kind of stuff that you put up that you don't have to pay for, not ads. So I really look at reach and engagement. So I look at how many people a post is actually reaching, and I like to look at how people are interacting with that post, because an engaged audience is a buying audience. So eventually over time, if they're engaging with your stuff, if they are liking, if they're sharing it, if they're retweeting it, if they're posting it to their story, the more they're interacting with you, sooner or later, they are going to buy from you. So they're going to get that ticket. They're going to recommend that show. They're going to know that it's happening, because most algorithms, what happens is when someone interacts with a post, right, then they're going to be seeing posts from that brand more often. Not only that, but then Facebook says, okay, look, a bunch of people have started reacting to this post. So now we're going to we sort of had like a little sample group of people that we showed that post to, but now we're going to open it up to more people and more people, which is why you can post on an account and then you could still days later be getting notifications that somebody liked the post. It's not like, 4 days later, the person's like, you know what? That was a great post. I'm going to like it. No, of course, what happens is it just got shown to them that day, because Facebook is vetting the posts that you're doing. So the more that people are engaging with you, not only are they're going to see your stuff more often, but your stuff is going to get in front of more people more often. And the more people that your stuff can get in front of, the odds are better that they're going to be buying stuff from you, because they're going to be able to know, like, and trust you. And then boom, there we go. So I think reach and engagement is super important. Now, you also may want to have, let's say, there is an initiative that you're doing and you're creating some content around that initiative. So you've got your big fundraiser coming up. You've got a digital show that you're going to be premiering, something like that. So then you may want to have 1 or 2 key metrics with that, like how many people are actually watching that promotional video about it. How long are they watching that video for? Are people clicking on the link? If they are clicking on the link, but then they're not buying, then we know that there's a problem with the website. There's not a problem with your post. If your post reached a lot of people and they clicked on it, but they didn't buy, something happened on the buying end of things. So, so those are kind of, but I try not to get too mired in the muck of the analytics, because there's a lot that you can look at. So brass tacks, reach, how many people are you reaching, and how much are they engaging with the stuff that you're doing?
And when you, because you're of course partnering with the marketing staff at the organization, do they, like, how much do you have to persuade them that likes and engagement, comments, shares are enough, because they're feeling such revenue pressure to, like, make sales? So how do you talk with them about the value of something that doesn't maybe immediately turn into
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's definitely hard. I think what's important is to reframe the overall mindset of what social media is doing. At one brass tacks, I mean, I feel like it's just as important to have a social media presence as it is to have a cleaning person at your space, right? Because that's sort of what people are looking to make a decision about whether or not you're actually a company that's really doing business for reals. So if you don't have that presence, that automatically is going to be a negative for you. But but it is really reframing. And I think a lot now is just because we're in the pandemic and because things are so hard, I think it's that, like, let's just keep looking to who's doing it right. How can we emulate that? How can we emulate it with what we have and the resources that we have available and the time that we have available? Because so many people have been furloughed or laid off or whatever. Let's just kind of reframe things for right now, and just sort of see if we can ride it out. But I feel like it's so important now to have that digital presence, and you can be a little bit experimental right now, and you don't have to be like pushing out as much, like buy tickets to this, buy tickets to this, buy tickets to this, which is why you can have those open-ended questions that spark conversations. Side note, when you have a post like that one that I said, how do you know that you're a part of this community without being a part of this community? And it gets 10,000 times the usual reach. The next post you post is going to get in front of way more people than it normally would. I sort of call it the wake of that initial viral post. So that's when I do like to say, like, we've got a post going viral right now. The next post should have some kind of a clear call to action, like, for a nonprofit thing, like either to make a donation, to buy a ticket, to do whatever the thing is that right now you want people to do, because it's going to have a little bit more reach than it would normally have. So you want to ride that wake.
That is a great, like, scheduling tip.
Yeah.
Gosh, you could even have like automatic triggers if we have any kind of post to just make things more efficient, right? Because part of this is really labor intensive, right? If we have a post that has more than 1,000, I don't know, you could make whatever metric is good for you. The next one should be more like a call to action.
And that could be something where, like, let's say you're having a quarterly meeting and you say, these are what the initiatives are and stuff like that. Just have that in your back pocket, right? Just, okay, so when something goes viral, say to your social media community manager or whatever, once we get, and industry standard for a viral is 10 times the usual reach. So if you usually reach 2,000 people, now you're reaching 10 times as many. I have a BFA. I'm not great at math in my head, especially on the fly. So whatever that is times 10. But I even try to keep the numbers easy, and I still can't do it. Like, I would need to be like, carry the one. So, but
I would say, I'm like, I cannot do math, and I cannot do math in my head either. I'm like, I know I went to Yale.
Yeah.
I can't do math in my head. So I never rely on that. Okay. That's great. That's such a good, you have so many great resources too on your website. I'm gonna link them.
Here's why, and this is, I mean, something that anybody can do for anything. So I try not to do things more than once, right? So if I'm having a one-on-one social media consultation with somebody and they ask me 3 questions, I try to make blog posts and or videos out of each one of those 3 questions, and then I post them, because somebody else is going to ask that question, and then I can always just point them in that direction. So that's just, if you're finding, like, for your organizations or anything like that, if people are always like, what's your parking situation like? What are your COVID protocols? What's your this? What's your that? If you've answered that question once, try to turn that into content in some way, shape, or form. Which is why I've asked Hannah if I could have the raw footage of this interview.
That's so true. Because whenever I get a question from a student, I get one email of like, I don't understand this thing about an assignment. I like send out an announcement like, hey, I got this question, like, because I assume
Super smart.
that like all of them want to ask. So also that leads me into my last question for you, which is like, what's changed about running social media during the pandemic?
Expectations. Expectations have changed. So whereas normally you may be able to churn out 5 to 7 posts a week, it just may not be a possibility now, because the person who does that is now at home with their kids all the time. And you're just not able to make as much content. I think there is a very big differentiation, I'm sure you're all seeing this as well, between the people who see that there is an opportunity here. You may not know what it is, but there is something, or the people who see like that this is something that has been done to them and they are completely screwed, right? So, you know, I have seen so many brands now say like, we're going to embrace digital in a way that we never had before, because we won't be able to survive. Like once things come out of this, like at least we know, even if it's not big, even if we know we've got 150 people who usually respond to our stuff, who usually open our emails, that's 150 people we can now rely on. They want to see our work when our work comes out. Like, so that I think is really important, is to recognize that the dollars aren't as high. The stuff you're doing isn't as much or as often or as big, but there are opportunities there, and you've got to be really wily and scrappy to find them. And that's kind of what I like a lot about organic social media, because it's free. So right now people have the opportunity to like try a Facebook Live and interview, or you know, Instagram Live or whatever it is, and interview their artistic directors, and interview the people who are on their staff that greet people every time, so you could get to know a little bit more about them. And you know what I mean? Like you can get really experimental and weird, and try new things and see how that affects your engagement and your reach, because you can try more things. You don't have as much like buy now, get this thing, do this thing, you know, you don't have those same kinds of initiatives. So you can get a little weirder and a little scrappier.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Is there anything else you want to share that you think our students should know?
Yeah.
Besides everything, you know.
Well, I think what's super important is to be very, is to read a lot and learn a lot about your field and like whatever it is, and then also own the thing that you know more about than most people know about. That's the whole reason that I wound up here in this niche. Side note, if somebody asks me, like the editor-in-chief of a magazine, if they say to me, hey, can you help me out with my social media? I'm not going to turn her down and say, no, I'm sorry, I only do theater. I am happy to work with them. But I realized that I knew more about theater than 90% of the people in the country. So I owned that. And that's when I was like, okay, this is what I am going to do. And I just really got into what I loved, and then figured out another way that I could be making money at it than the way that I had initially thought I was going to be making money at it, right? So then like when I realized it wasn't going to work, I was like, okay, there's another way to do this. But I was, when I was writing for Yes Broadway and like interviewing all these Tony nominees, and it was Tony season, and going to all these opening nights and stuff like that, that's when it became very clear, like, oh, because I have a BFA, because I went to NYU, because I studied theater history, I know all these people, I know all these plays, I know this stuff backwards and forwards. So if I can just learn something else lucrative that could get me backwards and like that I can learn backwards and forwards the same way and put those things together and actually make a career out of it, that's the secret right there, right? So So that's what I've done. The tricky part is like that imposter syndrome. So people are like, oh, well, maybe, I didn't go to school for marketing. So can I actually talk about marketing? And it's like, no, I put in the time. Like, I got more marketing books up here. I spend more time learning about this stuff than most people I know, right? So, so it's really putting those things together, but owning that thing that you love and that thing that makes you unique, and then just figuring out the way that you can make money doing it.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I'm going to hit stop on the record.